Hello, everyone. How's it going? Good? I'm still waiting like 100 more people to show up, but we'll just we'll hang out. And good news is, this is the first time I've ever had a meeting room with bathrooms in it. So if you guys feel the need to go to the bathroom, the door's open. You're not going to miss the show. So we're good here. Welcome. My name's Alex Rubio, Product Manager for Endpoint Management. This is Mike Boland.
Hi, I'm a member of the Endpoint Management Rapid Deployment team.
And I think we've both been here a really long time with Endpoint Management. So if you have any other questions after the meeting, feel free to come up and ask us, and we'll make our best to answer it for you. Today we're going to be talking about how we enhance Office 365 with Endpoint Management, right? And we get asked this quite a bit, right? Why do you need Endpoint Management when you have Office 365 and Intune? Right, so we have this conversation probably on a weekly basis with customers, and we figured we'd give some high-level pointers. So this level, this is a high-level session to kind of help you guys as in your decision. We've talked to a couple of you, and there's like 20 paths you could take, with between Endpoint Management and Intune and Office 365, and the number of devices you have. If you're doing MDM, if you're doing MAM, so there's a lot of options. Today we're going to cover some of those. But if you still feel like you have particular questions, we are going to have time at the end. I'm trying to make this probably around 30 minutes, so we have time to have a discussion. But it'll help us out. So in the interest of time, we have 5 top reasons. When you want to talk about how we want to add value and where Citrix adds value with Office 365. Number 1 is workspace integration. Obviously, Workspace is our new, from last year we announced it. We're doing a lot of adding value to Workspace, and we want to make sure that's the best experience for you. With Endpoint Management, that's one of our big goals, is making sure that experience that you have and the ability to manage your endpoints with Citrix Workspace is the best that we have in the industry. Number 2 is our Intune integration, right? So we've done a lot of work with Microsoft, and we have some, very unique offerings that we do, and we'll get into that if you want to use Intune as your endpoint, device management solution. Again, we are the best UEM for Citrix Workspace, and Mike will go through some of the, Windows 10 policies and iOS and Android policies that you want to set up for securing Office 365. And Secure Mail. Secure Mail is, again, one of our big, flagship products, right? Everything starts with your mail, and we want to make sure that is clear when we're going through these, when you're going through these decisions, is which is going to be your mail client, right? Are you going to use Outlook, and you can use Mail, you can use Native. So you want to make sure that you have that data on hand for that. And lastly, we have is our content collaboration solution, which again, we bring this up a lot when I talk to customers around, what is, OneDrive is one thing, right? You get that, but there's still a lot of other things you have to take into account. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So moving into Workspace, the biggest thing that we're moving towards, right, is a unified user experience. And I'm sure you've seen this in a lot of other slides, but every time I talk to a customer and I talk about Workspace, I'm asking, what is it Workspace to you, right? And everybody has something different to say. And it may be that we are not the best at naming this because it's an overloaded term. But when I talk about Workspace, I'm talking about the Workspace mobile experience. And that means that you have Workspace as a platform, right? Your old storefront server is running on the cloud, right? So you have your new Workspace service. And what Endpoint Management is doing is integrating with that. Right, so you have your Workspace app locally on your device, and Secure Hub and your MDM solution, right, is integrated with that. So you have a single page where you have your native apps, your SaaS apps, your virtual apps and desktops, and your files, right? So that's the new experience. So when you hear me talk about Workspace, this is what I'm talking about. We still have secure, we still have our standalone endpoint management solution, which uses a secure hub in the App Store and App Store inside of that. And that's still there today, and most customers are still using that. But when we're talking about a solution that's going to integrate directly with Citrix Workspace, and again, that's what we're selling today, right? We're selling Citrix Workspace Premium and Premium Plus SKU, right? Our endpoint management SKU is not really sold standalone anymore, right? It's all part of the Citrix Workspace suite. So this is what we want to do. We want to integrate and make this value that you have. I'm sure a lot of you are virtual app and desktop customers, and you want to see how you can easily integrate your management of mobile devices and Mac and Windows as part of this, right? As a quick show of hands, how many of you guys are using endpoint management today? Okay, that's a good half. Have you guys are using Intune as well for managing Office apps yet? For mobile? Okay. Anyone using Windows 10 or Mac management? Not you, Justin, you don't count. All right. And so, these are all the different options that you have to come up with and think about as you're going through this. One of the other things in here, is single sign-on. So we've done a lot of work when we're talking about Workspace. We redesigned the way that our authentication works from the mobile side to allow for a better single sign-on experience with our Citrix Identity platform, right? So when you're using Citrix Cloud, you can now authenticate with Workspace app, with Secure Hub, with Citrix Files, with Citrix SSO app, and they all share the same SSO token. So as long as you have one of those apps installed and you have the Workspace experience enabled, those apps will single sign on. And I'll talk a little bit more about one more feature coming through for that. And that's mobile SSO. So when I talk about mobile SSO, I just mentioned all of our first-party apps. Our Citrix apps are assigned with the same Citrix certificate, so it's easy for us to single sign on across those devices, right? It's shared, so iOS makes it easy. What is not easy is being able to use the same SAML token that we have and authenticate with other third-party apps like Workday and SAP and all of those. So that's what this feature is about, right? Is on your mobile device, you want to be able to install native apps that are public App Store apps and be able to single sign on to those with our Workspace credentials. And so that feature is tech preview. We just announced it this week. It's going to be tech preview. So if you guys are interested in that, please reach out to me after, and we can set up a tech preview and get you going to try it out. It'll be GA soon. We want to make sure that people have to try it out and give us feedback before we release it out for GA. And so this, just to be concise about this requires the Workspace experience to be turned on. So have endpoint management integrated with Workspace, as well as using our SaaS apps, right? So any app that today we have with part of our gateway service, with our SaaS solution, you can have the native third-party support. So Intune integration.
Yeah, so when we talk to customers that have done work with Intune, they've got Office 365 out there. They're trying to put it on their mobile devices. This on-prem access is probably the #1 reason that Microsoft wanted to partner with us. The customers want to talk to us about it, is because Microsoft doesn't have a good answer for their applications coming in. So whether you are a Intune customer that's gone all Intune and you need on-prem access, that's an option for you. If you're a customer that started or looked at this probably a year and a half ago, you probably looked at it with our MDM with Intune MAM in play. And recently this year, a lot of people aren't aware that we can do our full enterprise endpoint management solution with Intune as well. And so regardless of the mode you're running in, we have a way to help you address some of these challenges. And so, like Alex is saying, secure mail is one of the big drivers, right? That's the key application everyone's using. So you have an option in your deployment of, do I put secure mail in the Intune container, or do I put in secure mail in the MDX container, right? And so your business requirements will determine where that goes, but you have options with that. And with that, you have the Intune managed browser. So if you're a secure web user, right, if you go into the Intune space, you would use the Microsoft managed browser. That's the one that has the VPN pre-compiled into it, so it's ready to go when you get that on-prem access. And if you've got your internal apps that you need to put in the container as well, you can wrap those apps and bring them into the space and get on-prem access for those as well. And part of the beauty of this is that, rather than having, as an admin, trying to figure out what console do I go in for the configuration of an app for a given set of users, it's all built inside the Citrix Cloud, and we use the Graph APIs to write that information into Intune. So unless you're doing some really complex things or some unique things inside of Intune, for a lot of customers, there's no need to even go into the Azure portal to even do things with the Intune console. So as a customer for you, a lot of you guys are endpoint management customers already today. You've probably got some experience with the NetScaler already. You've set the environment up. The good thing for you is, secure mail policies, the UI looks a little different because there's some slight changes between Intune and endpoint management. But the policy settings that you see are what you're used to seeing today. And if you need to use this technology, it'll look similar to you there. So if you're in the Intune space, right, the same SDK that provides the VPN capabilities for your MDX applications does the same thing in Intune. So that same learning that you've done of getting the NetScaler off the ground and making that VPN work is going to feel almost exactly like what you're used to seeing in the past. So it simplifies your life there. And if you're a customer that's integrated some things like KCD or things like that to do single sign-on, if you've already got that on your MDX container gateway, the same thing will apply and it directly cross over and can be leveraged on the same NetScaler. So a lot of that work you've already put in for some of those things directly translates when you bring Intune into the gateway as well. And by the way, it uses the same wrapping tool. So the same MDX toolkit that you use to wrap your applications and your enterprise apps, that same toolkit is leveraged when you're doing things in Intune as well. There's some additional pieces you use for Intune, but the same components are there and leveraged. So there's a commonality of what you're doing there as well. So if you look at this, right, this is where things get simple, right? Because if you've already got endpoint management in place, what it looks like a lot of you guys do, that NetScaler, the subnet IP, and all those things that are passing through it, right, are already open. You open up a new 443 port for the gateway and a certificate, and now the traffic is coming in and just greatly simplifies your life. It adds the ability to add the Microsoft Authenticator to it. So if you've got apps that are trying to pass through that login of just tapping the app and accepting the authentication. And it helps you transition from some of these modern auth technologies that you've got in play. There's the capabilities inside the NetScaler to transition from that OAuth token and come into your network to your legacy systems. So,
Mike, one thing I wanted to mention there is we talk a lot to customers, and it starts getting confusion because there's like 20 different deployment methods you can use, right? If you want to use Intune side by side with MDX, you want to combine them in one container, you want to use SSO in the back end. So there's a lot of things. So what I try telling customers is, what is the highest use cases you want to solve today, right? And those are the ones we should focus on first, and then you'll see how it lays out, right? Because I've mentioned this to a lot of customers, and eventually they're like, well, I really just want these use cases where Office 365, I just want to make sure that the data, there's no data leakage there. But I really love secure mail and MDX and secure web works really well. I want to keep that, right? And then we can help you schedule, lay that out for you so you can have that type of deployment, right? Other customers were like, I'm moving to Intune. Intune is going to be my MDM, right? I really just want secure remote access. Right, that's my biggest use case right now that I'm missing. So we go down the route of having secure mail in Intune mode, and then having Intune managed browser as part of that with micro VPN to connect to your on-prem resources, right? So those are the types of things and conversations that we want to have. But at the beginning, you always want to say, these are the top use cases for mobile that I want to tackle for this, right? Because there is a lot of different ways of configuring this, and you can get lost and frustrated if you don't have that kind of priority list in place.
Yeah, I think the takeaway is it's not perfect, right? And if in a utopia that would be the case, but really need to consider your use cases and then plan out what makes the best sense for you. So I think a nice takeaway here is if you're an existing customer and you want to add this on, it's a trivial thing for us to go do that in the cloud, and in a matter of minutes, you can extend that out and do your Azure AD integration and Intune. So it's pretty simple to get that off the ground.
All right, so one of the things that we want to announce today, so there's a couple new things coming with Intune. Today we're announcing the ability to, when you do conditional access, this is something customers ask a lot. They're already using conditional access, and they have an option to do app-based conditional access. Today is really only Microsoft apps are in there. So what we're doing is we added secure mail. They got approved to be on top of that white list of apps for app-based conditional access. So with part of 1955, which is an EAR, we have the ability to do app-based conditional access. So that means if you have secure mail running inside Intune, right, you can check that box inside conditional access that says only allow approved apps, mobile apps to be approved. That link is there that you can go and check that out. So Android would be probably a few sprints, a few releases. It'll come through as well. So that's something that's new. Secondly, part of the same area there, when you're using Intune MDM as your Intune as your MDM, when you log into company portal and you install Intune in there, right? The first time that Intune launches, you have to log in again. So we fixed that. So now, when you're using secure mail inside Intune, the first time it logs in, if you have Microsoft Authenticator, Microsoft calls it the broker enablement. It'll flip over to Microsoft Authenticator and single sign you on, so you don't have to have that two sign-in process in there. So those two features are kind of joined, and that's being released soon. We have a couple of customers who have been waiting for that to do the true single sign-on scenario in that use case. And lastly was the one I want to talk about was our announcement today at the keynote where Microsoft is opening up the Intune APIs to allow us to use our MDM. So if you're using our endpoint management MDM solution, we can then send, using Intune Graph APIs, send that data over to conditional access so we can determine if you're using device-based conditional access, you can determine if the device is compliant or not based on that data, right? So then again, that's the one feature that I think, I don't know if some of our SEs are here, but they've really been jumping up and down and been asking for this because we've had a lot of customers that use conditional access today and they want it to be integrated with Citrix. So this is huge for us, so we're very happy to get this work going. Again, there's no timelines on that yet. We're still working on that, but we will have day one support when those APIs are available.
Yeah, I would say 75% of the customers I speak to, and I'm the team lead for EMS integration in my group, and almost everyone asks about that capability, right? Yeah. Especially as they start rolling out Intune, their security team starts pushing those sorts of conditional access rules, and not having that was a bit of a hole. So closing that hole is a big thing for us. So the best unified endpoint management, right? So when you look at this, right, the breadth of the platforms that we are able to cover, from Raspberry Pis for the Workspace hubs, to Mac, to Chrome, to iOS, to Android, right? There's an extensive amount of work and time that's gone into this. And so when you look at other platforms out there, there's very few that come close to what we do. And it's because it takes time to build the mindset of the endpoint provisioning and configuring. You see this in what the new Workspace is doing and how it integrates together and brings, really the endpoint management or unified endpoint, right? Bringing in receiver and all of your company apps and not just the mobile pieces to it, right? This is big, and it's what Gartner has been saying has been coming, about 4 or 5 years ago, they started telling us this is coming, right? And a lot of us looked at them and said they were a little crazy, but it's obviously happening. And so there's a lot of work that goes into plugging into the various vendors like Samsung that let you control operating system updates, right? And those are some big things for some of our banks and healthcare companies that need to be able to control that when it makes sense. And so we plug in and handle a lot of the key use cases here. So I thought I'd take a moment and talk about automated actions. And this is something that's been around for a long time, right? And a lot of people have been using, but people coming from the Intune world tend to forget about some of this. If you've ever tried to do things with conditional access, especially in large organizations, it can be very challenging to try and figure out what conditional access rule is stopping something from working. A number of the customers that I've worked with in doing some of our integration, it just wouldn't let an app run. And so we go with them and say, okay, you need to go figure out what this is. And they come back 5 days later and we finally figured it out, right? And so that creates some real challenges. And what we found is some of the conditional access rules we can do with our automated actions. And part of the benefit of that is understanding the resultant set of policy that's being applied to a client. All that information is deployed. You see it in the delivery groups in our console. So it's easy to go see what rules are applying to a given user. And then we extend beyond what some of the things Intune can do by being able to things like when AD account is disabled, it automatically wipes the device. So when HR terminates someone or someone leaves the company, your endpoint management, all the data on those devices is now protected automatically, as opposed to someone in the endpoint management team having to know that happened, get the communication, and go take the action. So this is some very common things people do. And conditional access is good at looking at things like the Microsoft approved list, but when you have things that deviate outside of that, it can start getting complex with a number of exclusion rules and things like that. So we can be very unique and specific about some things that we're doing with filtering rules. And so this is kind of just a quick thing I pulled out of kind of Intune and what you can do on their side of the house, right, and some of the extensions that we can do on ours. And I know I see some of the people in the room that I've done some work with automated actions. So being able to have one user that's testing the real policies that are going out for a set of users and filter out Alex or Mike or whoever it may be and be able to say, what happens when these rules apply to this user or don't apply to this user? And so it really allows you to build some really complex rule sets that make sense for you, as opposed to just kind of global policies that apply to everyone. And then when you need to pull someone out, it's very challenging. So this has been really, kind of reminds people of the features that are here that are meaningful. So let's step back for a second and think about the real world and what it takes to push an application out. And so I view it as kind of there's three types of applications out there that you're going to manage. They're the public apps. They're on the App Store. They're not programmed to accept configuration settings. They're not programmed to run in a container. So what do I do with those, right? How do I manage those apps in the best way possible? And then there's apps that support configuration policies. So those are apps that take Apple configuration or Android enterprise policies and configure them for you, right? And then the next is apps that play inside the container. And the variations in those applications create challenges for the deployment team. And let's talk a little bit about what that is, right? So from our perspective, be it Intune, be it our side of the house, Windows, iOS, Android, Mac OS, I think the common takeaway here is that endpoint management can help you manage these things. There's different types of technology and policies you push, but there's a single location to go and configure all these things, and we can attack it. And we've added Windows 10 here at the end because a lot of people view that as kind of a space that we've not played well, and a lot of people aren't well aware of what we can possibly do there. So let's take the first scenario of public apps that there's, that it is what it is. I got to make the best of it. There is some critical things that you want to do here, and part of that is enforcing device encryption, right? If you can't wrap it, you can't put it in a container, you got to make sure the device is secure. And there are some exclusions for things like open-end secure mail, right? If you don't have Intune, maybe the Office apps aren't as secure as you'd like them to be, but at least you can do some exclusions and only limit it to go to those specific applications, right? So you can put exclusions for whatever app secure mail needs to open. You can control that. And then over the last column over there is something that Alex pointed out to me recently that I didn't realize was there, and that's the ability with a iOS restriction policy to actually say that you can only unmanaged apps can read information or transfer back and forth between managed apps. So what data can come in? So this is a policy that the OS will control that allows you to specify if the app is considered managed from an MDM perspective, I can control the data between the two flows. So one of the challenges has been that Intune is a container and Citrix has a container, but the two aren't considered trusting of each other. This will help you establish a trust between the two, okay? So this is big.
Yeah.
This has been a hole that need to be closed, and it helps, right? Because if you're managing it, then the OS will help you manage those, and it's not just Office apps, it can be other apps that you pushed out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing here, right, the one gotcha here is that it does require MDM, right? Because that's the base layer for you to control the device when you want to have, you know, two different separate areas. So if you want kind of a man solution, then you have to go at the next layer, which is the open-in exclusions, or have everything inside one container like Intune, right, and have secure mail in there. So like when you start talking about all these options, that's where you have to make that decision. Like, you know, can you use MDM for most of your users? Then you have a pretty good solution, right?
Yeah, and I would add that's something that we don't do a lot these days, but it is something that's there that a lot of, you know, healthcare companies tend to limit access based on if you're on the company network or not, right? So there's always the option to establish a VPN, right, outside of the MDX container, right? You can do an on-demand per-app VPN, and then the app will come through your network, and then it looks like you're coming from your network. So depending on how your application is deployed and what other rules you have for desktops and various things, that may be an answer for you to be able to manage that and secure it a little bit better. So now let's take the next step of apps that don't play in the container but have configuration settings that you can do. So it allows you to go in and configure the app. And so on iOS, there's the Apple App Config option that allows you to push out some XML to configure it. Android Enterprise actually, you know, coming a little later to the game, actually does a little bit better job here. They give the option, the console can go read from the Play Store what options are available to you to configure and present those to you. So now I get a UI to edit this information as opposed to kind of getting down into the weeds of XML and configuring it. You know, but you know, one of the reasons why you need to start thinking about Android Enterprise and some of these capabilities that the device administrator option that we use when we do MDM on Android today is being deprecated. So you need to start looking at that process of moving off device administrator and onto some mode inside of Android Enterprise. And some of the benefits is the ability to start pushing these policies this way. So let's take the next step and go on into apps inside the Intune container. And so this is the back graphic here is an option for you to go in and look and see what it looks like in the Citrix library. And this is where you can go and add apps into Endpoint Management. You can manage the apps for Intune in your SaaS and virtual apps and desktops are managed inside of here as well. So there's a common UI for you to go and look at it. It's a common place where you go to add applications. So that process that you're doing just starts repeating for you. And then once you pick one of the apps that you want here, you pick it for your platform and you go and configure your policies just like you would in the Endpoint Management console. So there's about, depending on the app, somewhere between 14 and 70 some odd plus policy options for you. And Secure Mail really extends well beyond what Intune can do. Intune can do about 14 to 16 policies. We can do in the neighborhood of 70. So depending on the app, you get more features and capabilities there. And then one of the nice things about this is when you look at your security teams and auditing and things like that, when you go and add an app, you're doing as an Intune administrator. So the activities that you do are audited inside of Azure as that user's identity. So there's not just one Citrix service account that is doing all this work writing in. You've got auditing of what every user did inside your organization. And that's all just pushed via Graph APIs. So the next piece is Windows 10. And we're bringing this up, A, because it's pretty cool what you can do. B, a lot of people aren't aware that we did this, and we've heard this on a lot of calls, and it kind of surprised us a bit. So, you know, a lot of people think with Windows 10, you get Wi-Fi, VPN, some password policies, some basic things like that, right? And then you're done. And that's actually not true. If you see any of the other sessions, right, you'll see some more about this, but there's ability to control what a given app can read, create, update, and where they can save it, for example. Can this application run on that given desktop? You can limit depending on the application. There's times when you can specify what IP ranges and domain names that it can access, and gives you ability to audit all this information, right? So this is just a simple example of a document, and it's stopping the user from saving it. And there's different ways you can kind of audit it and not tell the user that it happened. You can block it, or you can warn them and give them the option to move on. But this is stepping way beyond what a lot of people understand can happen here. So this is just an example of a policy we had configured in one of our test systems, where it's kind of looking at what are the desktops apps and the apps on the store, what versions are supported, right? And then the ability, is this app allowed to run on this device or not, right? So you've got some controls there. And like I was talking about, just another option down at the bottom is, what's my enforcement level here? Do I block it? Do I warn the user? Do I just audit it on the background? What domains are allowed for this application to communicate, for example? So for me, this was a bit of a surprise a while back when I realized that, oh, golly, I've been thinking about this wrong and communicating it wrong to our customers. So it's a lot of power here.
Cool. So number 4 on the list is Secure Mail. I talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but really I want to emphasize, right? This app is designed exclusively for enterprise use cases, right? One of the things that we look at, right, is every policy that we add, every new feature that we add, how is this controlled by the admin, right? Can the admin turn it off? Can they use it? How do they deliver it to the user? We've heard it loud and clear, right? Every little change that happens to a user, some companies have to write article on it or explain it to users, because then they get confused. So we try to take very clear measures as we add new user experience features, that they get delivered in a timely manner and allow the admin to control it. Again, we already talked about it, but this app does work in Intune, and it adds on-prem Exchange server access, which that's still one of the key use cases that fields want to do. That people are moving over to Exchange online, and they're using hybrid modes as well. So that's easily migratable as well. So once you're ready, you can start moving users to that. So there's a lot of information there, a lot of flexibility for Secure Mail. I think Mike mentioned it, but I went through and I looked, and we have about 50 features that are controlled by policy just for the app. That's not counting MDX, right? MDX still has like maybe another bunch of other features as well. So we have that, and as well as in terms of feature, please don't try reading this. It's just a high-level slide. That first column is Secure Mail, where we have all these enterprise-specific features that you can go in there. Right? You could download this slide later. It's outside there on Citrix.com that you can go and look at this. But it does show that this is a feature-rich client that does provide a lot of value for the enterprises. So the last thing we want to talk about is Citrix Content Collaboration. So one of the things that you get right with Office is OneDrive, right? So you have Office 365, you're all set, right? No. So where are your files stored today, right? I haven't met a customer yet that are just completely happy with OneDrive and that they use that for everything and it's great, right? I'm sure there are people out there. I haven't found one yet. But there is a lot of places today that you have access that your files are still stored at, right? And they're on-prem, they're local, you have network drives or in your inbox. So there's a lot of places that you still have to deal with, right? And I think this is one of the areas that I always talk to customers about, is that we have the ability with Content Collaboration to go in and help you manage these things, right? So one of the things that we do is we can do a hybrid environment. We don't really care if your files are actually stored on our server. We have the ability to do connectors that allow you to connect to these different areas, right? There's a lot of people with Box, anything else, right? OneDrive, there's a huge list of things here. And as you progress, you probably want your new files and stuff to be stored in a new location, and that's you're going to slowly migrate. But you can't do that from one day to the next, right? People have terabytes, some even petabytes of information out there that you want to slowly start migrating over. Maybe you want to restrict one, you still have access to that. So we have the flexibility of having that layer of management in there that allows you to do that, right? And when you connect that with some of the other things we talked about, it does become a great solution. By the way, all this stuff we've talked to today, right, is all part of the Workspace Premium solution, right? So you have access to this. You don't have to buy anything extra to get this working. So those are the types of things that we want to emphasize, that there is still a lot of things you have to think about as you're moving, as you're giving access to mobile devices. How are they going to access their files, right? Are they going to connect through an app? Are they going to use OneDrive? Is your files on-prem? Do you need an on-prem connector to connect through that? Is a Parrot VPN okay? Are you using some SSO solution there? So once you have that list of information, then you can make the decisions. But that's one of the things that we've seen, and usually customers come back saying, yeah, this really helps us, and it helps us improve our Office 365 adoption and use Citrix with that, right? So that was kind of the high end. We have, I think, 9 minutes left. If you want to have any questions here, feel free. I'm not sure on that. We'd have to check with the content collaboration PMs on that. Do you know?
Not sure.
No. If you ask me, I'll tell you who the right person is, and I could get you in contact with them. Anyone else? Andrew. Yeah.
Intune managed browser has micro-VPN built in today.
Correct.
Correct.
Right. So if you go to the App Store today, Intune managed browser for iOS and Android both have the micro VPN installed. So all you have to do is go to our Citrix library. I mean, once you have the Intune, all that stuff set up, you go in, you publish the app through there. We take our micro VPN policies and push it to Intune. So that way, when Intune comes up, it'll see those policies, it gets downloaded, and it turns on the VPN for you. If the policies aren't there, you will never know it's there, right? We're dormant. So that's it's pretty useful.
Yeah, I would add one caveat to that. When they're testing, the Microsoft Managed Browser does not get policies out of the gate when it launches. An Office app has to launch first to get policies to update that app.
Is that true for any Intune policy for the browser? Because we've noticed that we're playing around with Intune.
Yeah, Managed Browser is one of those.
Yeah, it used to work the way you'd think, right? You'd launch the app and it would come up, and then Apple rejected their application. So just be aware. It doesn't matter if you're using our stuff or you're using Microsoft. Yeah. That's just the way it works, right? So people test that and they think it's not working. So that's just
the second one. I don't know if you want to mention that we keep hearing is when you guys are testing and you're changing policies on iOS, it's very hard. Like Intune will cache those policies. So sometimes you have to do a factory reset of the device to recheck to make sure those policies are enforced.
So
right?
The takeaway is do not change users from device to device, right? Don't test with my ID today and use Alex on the same device tomorrow, right? Specify a set of devices because it's just
and use a test device. Don't use your personal phone.
Yep.
On Android it's a lot easier. It's an easier way to reset it, and a lot of people use Android for testing because you're changing policies, you're getting it all right. It's easier. For iOS, sometimes the keychain doesn't get refreshed. If you're using MAM only, you have issues. So these are just things that we've learned from experience and from customers. Just trying to help you out. Sorry, I couldn't hear that. These are just things that we've learned from experience. I don't think there's anything, and it's all Microsoft stuff, so it's not really our code. Like for us, it's just we put the policies there, and it gets downloaded through Intune, right? So as long as the policies is there, it's all Intune downloading that stuff. So we don't have anything in our docs on it. But I have like research, like I've Googled it, and there's forums and stuff of people talking about it.
Could you elaborate on EPM enterprise mode in conjunction with 365? Is that specifically cloud-based, or is it on-prem enterprise mode?
The integration?
Yes.
So the direct integration requires a cloud version because we do the direct calls to Intune and the Citrix Cloud library. All the UI is in Citrix Cloud, is not in the SEM console, right? So you require the Citrix Cloud, the endpoint management service for that. Cool, guys. Well, if you don't have anything else, thank you. If you want to come up and ask questions, thanks for your time.
Thank you.